Hello and welcome to your Health Reclaim. This is your host, DrPND, and today we are going to do a quick discussion on factors that actually influence nutrient intake and therefore cause deficiencies. Since the last couple of podcasts, we talked about heavily nutritional deficiencies and a lot of the causative factors. One of the common questions that I get quite a bit is people have a hard time understanding how deficiency occur, especially subclinical, those, subliminal deficiencies that, we talked about in the other webinar or the podcast. And for some reason, they have a hard time, wrapping their mind around, how do those nutrient deficiencies occur, especially they're, taking like some kind of a generic brand, multivitamin mineral, supplement or product. And I just want to go over a few of the factors. There's probably about like 10 or 11 or so of those that are the most prevalent. And therefore, I really hope that, people get an understanding of, what causes those nutrient deficiencies and why it is. So, as we discussed before, nutrient deficiencies, are a common root cause behind, many chronic symptoms. Chronic health issues, and they're also, by default, they're risk factors for chronic disease. So, while, you may develop nutrient deficiencies due to a, poor diet, the cause of nutrient deficiencies can go beyond just poor nutrition. Correcting those root causes and issues behind nutrient deficiencies and taking the steps to improve nutrient intake, absorption, assimilation, and utilization can really help achieve optimal nutrient levels and improve obviously overall health. So just a quick recap, what's the importance of the role of nutrients in the body. We have two kinds. We have the macro and the micro. The macronutrients are nutrients that your body needs in large amounts. They're the carbs, proteins, and fats. So they have a caloric value, they actually have energy in them. Micronutrients are nutrients that our bodies require in a lot smaller amounts, and those include vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, and other substrates. So they do not have a caloric value, so though they do actually carry energy with them. But our bodies absolutely need both macro and micronutrients. Again, back to what we talked about in previous topics of ultra processed foods. One of the reasons why ultra-processed foods are so dangerous and cause a lot of harm is because during the processing of those foods, the micronutrients get removed. So you can get a lot of macronutrients. For example, let's take something like Cheerios or Frosted Flakes, Captain Crunch, any of that kind of metabolic garbage that a lot of people eat, and you'll have a lot of macronutrient in the form, especially of sugars and starches, carbohydrates, but you have little to none micronutrients, and that's why if you see a lot of those cereals actually have to be artificially fortified to some very minimal degree, and that's truly, honestly, debatable if it's effective even in any way, shape, or form, let alone being from optimal. But when you process food, ultimately you have to remove most, if not all, the micronutrients. And that's why, again, processed food makes them so dangerous. So micronutrients are crucial for our immune system, growth and development, metabolism, obviously, maintaining cellular homeostasis, energy production, hormonal health, brain health, energy levels, building and repair processes, DNA synthesis and repair, which is obviously extremely important, cellular signaling and communication, and many, many more vital actions. I mean, there's literally billions of metabolic reactions that take place in our cells every single second, microsecond, and those are mediated by certain micronutrients. So micronutrients are made to function in a synchrony, and they can be dependent. They're definitely dependent on each other without fail. So if you're deficient in one micronutrient, you'll almost always are going to be deficient in another, or you'll have excess of something else. So our bodies cannot make micronutrients. These have to be obtained. We must meet our needs with high nutrient dense foods and or proper supplements that are needed. The high nutrient dense foods can be plant sources and also animal sources. And that's why back to supplements. Supplements are very important because a lot of people cannot obtain those high nutrient dense foods, and or they will not eat them. They just don't like them. They can't stand them, whatever the case might be. So the reasons being, are many, but mostly, the reason why we have this deficiency, depletion in general, is also because our, soils are very, very badly depleted, generally speaking, in micronutrients. And that is ultimately most of our food is grown on those depleted soils. Not to mention the chemical is used in our food supply, in and on our food supply, and obviously the chronic disease epidemic that we have in this country. So, real quick, what is considered normal levels? That's sort of a loaded question, but the RDA, which people know as the recommended daily allowance, this is the absolute minimum requirement that again, it's very debatable now, but basically the levels are to prevent actual clinical deficiencies from occurring and really are far from optimal for what is required for, health. As we discussed, again, in our previous podcast, that most physicians do not really recognize subliminal and subclinical deficiencies, so which are the, lower end deficiencies at all. So that is what most people have nowadays. They don't have clinical deficiencies like beriberi or scurvy or pellagra, but they have, many different levels, different shades of gray of, subliminal deficiencies. So what is optimal will greatly vary person to person, but generally what are known as optimal functional ranges, especially when it comes to, the minerals, antioxidants, water soluble, lipid soluble vitamins. Antioxidants are a little harder to measure, at least for now, and primarily because it's cost prohibitive. And levels are not yet optimally established for most, at least that we know of. But I'm sure that eventually, as technology progresses and the cost of running those tests drastically decreases, we'll be able to have a lot more thorough functional ranges for the analysis as well. But regardless, anyway, so optimal status. What is that? Well, that is ultimately what your body needs for optimal function. And this can be achieved first and foremost with a very high nutrient dense organic whole food diet. There's a probably tailored toward the individual. Okay, remember, nutrition is very by individual. Okay, that's why you can't cookie cut, and that's why you cannot subscribe to the certain fads in schools such as paleo, keto, or whatever other diet fads are out there. Even though in themselves they can be beneficial for some time and for certain people, but it's very dangerous to really try to fit your body into a mold that is never meant to fit on, unless you understand what you're doing. So depending on many factors such as state of chronic illness, lifestyle, age, activity, stress level, most people require a customized supplemental protocol, at least in the beginning, regardless of how healthy and nutrient dense their diets become. And that is simply because we have a chronic long-term subclinical deficiencies that are present. It's not practical for most people that they can be addressed with just good quality nutrition. It's definitely possible, but it's not practical. So that's why proper supplementation is very important at the very beginning. And if that person knows that, for example, they need certain nutrients in more larger quantities, but they cannot obtain them due to food sensitivities or allergies, or just the ability to obtain them or preference of food, then they'll just continue to supplement a little bit along with the healthy diet. But either way, again, it's a very individual, generally speaking, what people need. So the other thing is that keep in mind that there's a major difference between optimal nutrient state versus adequate nutrient state. So you might hear this on the internet. People talk about optimal nutrient state or adequate nutrient state. They're not synonymous. The former, is the level of nutrient intake that is needed for truly optimal health. That is obviously optimal nutrient state. The latter, the adequate nutrient state, is the nutrient levels needed to prevent symptoms of deficiency or disease states, ultimately. So be careful when you listen to people when they talk about optimal nutrient as opposed to adequate nutrient states. So here are the few biggest factors that I have seen in my practice that really do contribute to nutrient deficiencies. Okay, so number one is the nutrient intake itself. So the most obvious way to achieve adequate or optimal, better, yet optimal nutrient status is to optimize the nutrient intake. So if your nutrient intake is not optimal or at least adequate, you're obviously going to be running the risk of developing nutrient deficiencies. Following a poor diet with lots of low nutrient processed foods and not enough nutrient dense whole foods will without fail set you up for nutrient deficiencies. Even if you're mostly or only consuming high nutrient healthy foods, you may not be covering your nutrient intake requirements if you're not eating enough due to, again, calorie restriction, dieting, cultural preferences, personal preferences, and many other reasons like, food sensitivities and, again, allergies. But moreover, the nutrient density of our foods is affected by the quality of our soils, as I mentioned a little earlier. Eating disorders and disordered eating in general will interfere with nutritional intake, okay? Either due to the severe caloric restriction of certain types of foods, purging, and other, disordered habits, which, can be quite common. Early picking, when you're harvesting, storage, transportation, processing, cooking can interfere with our food's nutrient levels. For example, if as opposed to you steaming a vegetable as opposed to boiling it, when you boil it, you're going to lose definitely a little bit more nutrition in the boiled water as opposed to if you steam it, for example, as opposed to if you don't eat it very fresh and raw. Unfortunately, this is a serious issue that may require supplementation. Again, even in those people who are following a healthy diet. So the ability to obtain those foods, properly prepare them, and eat them on a regular basis, it's not really feasible or practical for every single person. Even here in the United States, generally speaking, we have a lot of availabilities. So that's the first and most obvious. The second one is what's called dietary anti-nutrients. So it's not enough for us to take in enough nutrients. Our body has to absorb those nutrients, obviously. So certain foods called anti-nutrients may, in some people, interfere with absorption of certain nutrients and the digestion of those foods. Anti-nutrients include things like lectins, goitrogens, salicylates, phytates, and oxalates. There's been a study done, I think, in 2020. There's a peer review in the journal Nutrients, I believe, that anti-nutrients in high amounts or administered in isolation may actually lead to health issues. However, when prepared properly or used in lower amounts, they may not be an issue. For instance, folks that have thyroid problems, I always encourage them to stay away from kale. Kale has become, or did become a while ago, kind of like the poster child of veganism, vegetarianism, and kind of attached itself to become the poster child of health. So eat kale, by default, you're healthy. So a lot of people eat insane amount of kale. They'll juice it, they'll bake it into chips, they'll make like lasagna and pasta with it, obviously salads, they'll blend it in smoothies. I mean, it was getting out of hand. Well, kale, especially aside from the fact some people are sensitive to the last thing you should be eating if they have food sensitivity to kale, but even if they don't, a lot of people eat it raw in excess amounts, and it does have quite a bit of anti-nutrients, the goitrogens that are present in there. So I would stop if you eat kale, keep it to somewhat minimum, and also at the same time make sure it's cooked, whether you bake it, you steam it, but don't eat it raw, don't juice it. Because when a smoothie and a juice, you're able to intake tremendous amount of those goitrogens, and they can have problems, especially again if you have thyroid problems. So that's just an example of that. Spinach has quite a bit of high oxalates, so the oxalate can cause problems for some people that are susceptible to kidney stones and so forth. So again, spinach, cook it. Don't eat it raw. But that is something that it's important to understand and realize. Beans and legumes, it's very important that they're soaked properly, prepared properly. A lot of people that want to eat lentils and beans, I always tell them, soak them, in some kind of acidic medium for at least, good 12 hours, if not 24 hours, rinse them temporarily, intermittently, and then either slow cook them or pressure cook them for the appropriate amount of time to be able to break down most of those lectins that are present and not, have issue with, micronutrient absorption. These are just, simple things that a lot of people, I believe, know, but they really don't think often about. Things like sprouting, soaking, fermenting, and certain cooking methods, again, like either slow cooking or pressure cooking, can drastically decrease the anti-nutrient effect of these foods. So, however, some people simply have to limit or avoid those foods completely that are high in one or, all of these anti-nutrients that I spoke about, due to the simple fact that they just have usually, almost always, GI issues that need to be addressed before they can, go back to eating those foods, within reason. So the other issue for that we're going to go into, the third one, is insulin resistance, oxidative stress, and just general inflammation, global inflammation levels. So as everybody knows, oxidative and chronic, stress, inflammation may increase the risk of various diseases. We all know that, and that may lead to obviously digestion issues, malabsorption, or high, issues, or sometimes even a higher nutrient intake, which can cause imbalances. Chronic inflammation is the key driving factor, as we know, behind a lot of disease-related nutrient deficiencies, increasing the risk of, reduced food intake, insulin resistance, and muscle metabolism. It's a real thing. So insulin resistance can also increase cellular uptake, actually, of nutrients. You're not using those nutrients as efficiently. You need, them a higher amount. So therefore, your body kind of goes through utilization rate that is abnormal. It's a lot higher than what it really should be optimally. Kind of like revving up your engine and, having the vehicle on uphill while you're, trying to accelerate, and the vehicle being fully loaded with the AC on. The gas, the amount of gas that's going to go through is going to be substantially higher, as opposed to that car was, non-packed, the AC is not running, and you're driving on a flat surface, kind of cruising. Same thing here. The utilization of nutrients is going to drastically increase. So the fourth one is digestion and absorption. So how does your body really digest, absorb, and assimilate nutrients from your digestive processes, right? A lot of people have GI issues. I deal with it quite a bit. So many factors affect, obviously, optimal GI function, but the chronic stress, alcohol, smoking, sleep deprivation, chronic inflammation, inflammation in the state of your microbiome, dysbiosis present, digestive capacity and ability, all these things and many others can really affect how you, digest and absorb and assimilate your nutrients. For example, proper food combining and timing is also a very important issue. A lot of times, when I work with people and we try to address GI issues, I'll tell them, I'll give them very specific directions on how to eat. So how you eat, it can be just as important what you eat, which a lot of people do not know, understand. Proper food combining, proper timing, proper sequence of foods, and so forth. Like if somebody has insufficient digestive capacity and other digestive issues, for example, you're going to want to combine nuts, yogurt, and fruit, especially high fiber fruit, all in one meal, mixed together eating. That can be a recipe for disaster. Or some people eat, they eat protein and the starch and the vegetables all mixed in at the same time. Someone who doesn't have healthy digestion, they can really wreak havoc on them. So, that's very important. Not eating rushed, chewing your food, which we all know about. Truly liquefying your food before you actually swallow it. Mindful eating, with no stress, relaxing. Not when you're driving, not when you're, watching a scary movie or some action thriller, or let alone having the heated discussion at the table with friends and family, whoever it might be. All these things are very important. And they will influence, ultimately, nutrient absorption. So there are also many other factors, which, we can get into at another time, but these are really kind of the most important ones that, I want to share. So moving on to the next factor, that's lifestyle. Certain lifestyle factors, by default, will affect your nutrient levels. For example, sun exposure is key. Healthy sun exposure. Not all nutrients strictly come from food. So while some foods include vitamin D, believe it or not, most of our vitamin D and the best way to get it comes from the sun. Not getting enough good high quality sunshine will run the risk of nutrient deficiencies. Moreover, things like high level of physical activity can also interfere with the nutrient levels. Sweating too much or heat exposure may lead to dehydration and electrolyte loss, which can cause other issues and start a chain reaction with problems, including low sodium, magnesium, potassium, calcium, and chloride levels. And nowadays, a lot of people like to overdo things. They will do CrossFit, and then very high stress workouts. They'll get up at 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning to be at CrossFit at 5 o'clock in the morning when they really should be sleeping. They're not fueled properly, they're not hydrated properly usually. Then a lot of them, depending what they do, they might go into the sauna afterwards. And they're just adding insult to injury for a lot of people, especially if they have chronic issues, especially if they have, things like anxiety, depression, thyroid problems, adrenal problems, digestive problems. That's why a lot of those people, believe it or not, have a lot of issues, because that continuous hard training stresses the body out. But that's a podcast that I'm going to talk about another time. So, that's very important. Again, very high intensity exercise is done at a high frequency. For example, like CrossFit, some CrossFit workouts. Some people just really push themselves hard, like ultramarathon runners, or doing a triathlon training and so forth. With high frequency will also lead to nutrient deficiencies by increasing the requirement for certain, if not most, nutrients. But by default, if you're asking your body to do what you're asking it to do with that kind of high intensity and performance, the nutrient level is going to go through the roof. It just has to. Again, it needs fuel. It needs nutrients to be able to function properly and to go through its proper cellular processes. So, obviously this varies greatly between individuals and, what they can handle. But nonetheless, it will affect everybody, even the best of us. So most people nowadays, they like to train regularly, however, overdo exercise by default, as I said there. Most people, would actually overdo exercise than underdo it. And by default will also cause higher chronic cortisol levels, which by itself will increase nutrient requirements. So if you're, stressing out, burning the candles on both ends with, too much work, too much exercise, little sleep, and then you're asking for problems, you are going to, your nutrient requirements are going to be much, much, much higher. So just, keep that in mind. The other factor that we're going to get into is, health challenges and, overall disease burden of people. Acute health issues, chronic health challenges, and disease may also increase your risk of nutrient deficiency. And I would say I'm actually go ahead and say absolutely will. To what degree, obviously, going to vary, but it will increase nutrient deficiencies. And those nutrient deficiencies and sometimes nutrient excesses from imbalances can really be linked to many infectious and inflammatory diseases, by the way. A lot of people are not aware of that. Acute infections may increase, for example, because of your need for vitamin C, zinc, glutamine. Acute gut infections may lead to dehydration, electrolyte loss, imbalance, or other nutrient losses. Chronic digestive issues, as Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, will interfere with the breakdown, absorption, digestion, and digestion of micronutrients. It's going to happen. Hypothyroidism and excess alcohol intake may also affect digestion, nutrient absorption, and nutrient metabolism. Heavy menstrual cycles or high blood loss due to other issues can obviously increase the risk of iron deficiency and cause anemia. This is just, a lot of things that many people go through, okay? And again, depending on the disease state of the person, depending on the burden, or, is it just one big issue? Is it, a few smaller issues? It's so relevant, to the person. And there's no exact way of knowing, but it will. It's a type of stress, and the body goes through that. And because of it, nutrient deficiencies are going to, happen. The other factor that I want to talk about is becoming more and more prevalent factor as the years go by, and that is strictly because the insane amount of ridiculous overuse and overprescription of medications, what we call polypharmacy. A lot of people are on just insane amount of medications that just a lot of times not needed, and I'm not going to go into that, but it's ridiculous. So certain medications will increase the need for certain nutrients, and by either metabolically, or they'll actually reduce the absorption of certain nutrients, or just straight up deplete the levels of things. For instance, long-term use of metformin, which is a type 2 diabetes drug, can lead to vitamin B12 depletion and deficiency ultimately. I just want to kind of give you a quick example of certain things that I see quite a bit. ACE inhibitors, right? Big issue with zinc. Antacids, PPIs, and people pop those things like candy. Vitamin B12, folate, vitamin D, calcium, iron, zinc, all the time. Antibiotics, which people take like candy too. B vitamins, vitamin K, obviously damage to the healthy microbiota of the GI, causing healthy intestinal bacteria to die and damage. Calcium, zinc, magnesium, iron, vitamin B6, zinc. You see those, you can test for those very easily. We have those functional panels that we can test for, and you see these deficiencies all the time. Antidepressants, again, one huge thing. B12, coenzyme Q10, folate. Beta blockers cause a lot of coenzyme, CoQ10. Anti-diabetic drugs in general, the glucophage, tolinase, micronase, some of those you guys know, B12, folate, and CoQ10. Contraceptives, that's one of many people use. Again, B complexes all over the board. Damages the healthy intestinal bacteria. Magnesium, zinc. Corticosteroids are a big one people take. That really depletes the vitamin C, D, folate, calcium, magnesium, potassium, selenium, and zinc. And selenium is a dangerous one to deplete because that's actually a trace mineral. It's not really even a micromineral, it's just a trace mineral that easily can get depleted. And there's, generally speaking, a nationwide issue with selenium and iodine, which both are dependent on each other. NSAIDs, things like ibuprofen, aspirin, naproxen, people take those things literally like candy, like breath mints, pop them all day long. This causes a massive issue with vitamin C, iron, potassium, and folate. Proton pump inhibitors like the antacids, same thing. B12, folate, vitamin D, calcium, zinc, so forth. Statins, the number one prescribed drug still. Those things, potassium, magnesium, but primarily CoQ10 depletion. And there's many other that are, and a lot of those, a lot of people remember they take a polypharmacy. They don't just take one. They can take 3, 4, 5, 10 medications for years on end. And no wonder why people have issues. Of course, you're going to get nutrient depletion without fail. So that's a big one. Another factor we're going to talk about quickly is just the environmental toxic exposure and the overall toxic burden and load of the person. Our world is full of environmental toxins. We all know that. These can affect our health some way or another without fail. Environmental toxin exposure and a high overall toxin load will interfere with your body's ability to absorb nutrients properly. It's just a fact. It may also create inflammation and chronic health issues that may increase your need for nutrients by default, while yet interfering with the nutrient absorption itself. It's different for everybody. It all depends what the person gets exposed to. But things like herbicides, pesticides, fungicides, and household chemicals, deodorants, antiperspirants, personal hygiene products, laundry detergents, got dryer sheets, laundry softeners. You name it, it doesn't stop. The average, I can only imagine the average count of dangerous chemical is air freshener is a big one, like Febreze and Wick, all that. Poison that people use all the time in their house. I mean, you walk into somebody's house and it will hit you like a ton of brick. Like you can see the pressure. Window hasn't been open for probably months, and all they breathe just those vapors that come off from those volatile organic compounds that are from those air fresheners, and that's just toxic. So again, that's a big burden. And so proper detoxification and remediation, ultimately reducing your total toxic load, these are keys to lowering those effects of toxins, therefore helping with micronutrient absorption. So last thing I wanted to say for is last factor is genetics. Genetics do play a role, there's no doubt about that. So everyone has different needs. Some people may need more vitamin B12, folate than others. Others may need more zinc or vitamin B6. Who knows? For instance, those with MTHFR genetic issues need methylated forms of B vitamins. They won't be able to utilize other forms as well. If they have a methylation issue, that can be a problem. So there's a lot of science that has shown. I think the Journal of Medical Biochemistry, they did published a study showing that polymorphism will increase the risk of B12 deficiencies. There's many others like that. So the point is that we need to look at individual differences, on our genetic level. What we can metabolize, what we can absorb, what we have the tendency to be deficient in. And there's some good tests out there that you can really run that can show you, your ability, and you don't need, your own body, what it needs and how it can process and absorb nutrients. But these are really the most important factors that I've personally seen in my practice. They have been definitely monumental in some cases in helping people, because if you don't address those, a lot of times you can eat, really high quality nutrients, nutrient diet, take the best quality supplements. But if there's a lot of other factors that we discussed, or some of those, again, such as the polypharmacies, these are huge. It takes me so much longer for me to replete somebody and optimize the nutrient status who has been on years, if not decades, on a polypharmacy structure, as opposed to somebody who is taking one or two medications and perhaps even none. And it's a fact, but the polypharmacy issue is a big problem on many levels. And when it comes to nutrient deficiencies, that's definitely a big one. So without going into a lot of depth, let's talk about just the best way to support nutrient status. So how can we ensure that we have optimal nutrient levels? Well, food is obviously the most important part of it, right? But it's also much more than that. So let's look at the best ways to support that. One, anti-inflammatory, high nutrient dense, organic whole food diet. Following a good quality daily nutritional protocol can help ensure your optimal nutrient intake is met and reduce a lot of the risk of imbalances that interfere with nutrient absorption. Obviously, at the same time, avoiding refined sugar, refined digestive seed oils, things like deep fried food, any junk food, artificial ingredients like additives, flavorings, colorings, sweeteners, and any other, obviously, highly processed foods is essential for that. So a lot of folks who make the mistake of doing a substitution theory, what I call, is that they will have a very high nutrient dense diet, they'll take high quality supplements, and because they do those two things really well, they think that they can go ahead and eat junk food at the same time and drink alcohol. And even though it might not be every single day, it's often enough that they really hurt themselves and not help themselves. And it doesn't work like that. You cannot erase yourself to a positive by just doing 2, 3, or 4 good things and then doing 1 or 2 bad things. It's going to catch up to you eventually, albeit less and take longer, but it's still. So don't be fooled when you believe that you can, do 2 good things and then, do 1 bad thing and then get away with it. Ultimately, it's not going to work. So, basic stuff: eat lots of greens, vegetables, fruits, good sprouts, fermented fruits, fresh frozen fruits. Try to stay away from dry fruit that can have issues. good quality nuts, seeds, grass-fed pasture meats, pasture-raised organic eggs, poultry, wild-caught fish and seafood, and the wild game. Focus on organic, obviously, as much as possible as you can. Not only they're going to get a higher nutrient quality and density, but obviously you're going to avoid the dangerous chemicals, which they can hurt you. They make a difference. They're going to contribute to your toxic load. Eating local and fresh picked from a farm, or your garden, obviously can help to reduce nutrient depletion due to early picking, transport, packaging, and storage, which can be an issue. However, be careful, because a lot of people go to a farmer's market thinking they're buying local, and you have people that lie. And I catch them every single season. Go in there and get the guy. If you look around, what you're looking for, you're going to see people that are selling produce that they bought from a massive market down in Atlanta and going to a farmer's market and claiming like they grew it themselves. I confronted a guy a few years ago. He got really upset. But don't think it because you buy something at a farmer's market that says local that it's good, because some people can grow local, but that's great, but they're not organic or naturally grown. So now you're doing ingesting a pesticide or herbicide, fungicide soup of some kind that is being sprayed in that food. So just be very careful when you're buying local, fresh from a farmer's market or whoever it might be. The other thing that we need to do to support optimal nutrient levels is digestive support. Okay, so support digestive health and stomach acid levels, very important. Supporting digestive health, improving stomach acid production, bile flow, and enzyme production is absolutely critical. So, of course, a gut-friendly, anti-inflammatory diet, is the key in doing this, which ultimately boils down to eating, healthy, high-quality foods. The other factor that is huge: reduce stress and optimize sleep. I cannot tell you how important to pay attention to sleep is. Reducing stress and optimizing sleep is critical for optimal nutrient levels. Proper nutrient absorption and low inflammatory levels, again, without fail, is very important. So I recommend practicing, things, just, relaxation techniques, prayer, meditation, just gratitude, mindfulness, the usual stuff. You can find the stuff online. There's apps that people have, but ultimately reduce stress by any means necessary and support and optimize sleep. For some people, that can be a severe challenge, and it can take many, many months, if not a few years, to be able to get to the level. But as long as you don't stop and don't give up, you'll get there. You just keep going. But things like, obviously avoiding, stimulants at night. Alcohol is a huge one. Avoiding electronics, sugar, heavy food, wrong food combining, in the evening, especially before time. These things are very important, because a lot of people come home late, they're starving, they're stressed, they'll eat a heavy, unhealthy meal, they'll drink alcohol. A lot of people tell them, well, alcohol helps me to get to sleep. That might be so, because it's a depressant. But ultimately, even though it gets you to sleep, per se, it's going to interfere with your body going to this deep, restful, optimal sleep that it needs. Not to mention, alcohol by itself is going to cause, thickening of the blood temporarily, is going to cause interference with proper, hormonal metabolism, especially estrogens, and many other things. A lot of people wonder why they cannot lose, weight with alcohol, especially women, and they just can't get into their head that has nothing to do with the calories, has to do with what the alcohol does to the cellular processes temporarily while it's being detoxified out of the body, that inhibits proper fat utilization for energy. I did a whole podcast on alcohol. Go back and listen to it. It's going to help you understand why you have to remove alcohol. Okay, it's really that simple. And if you need alcohol to live, you have a problem. I'll be honest with you. We're not talking about raising a glass or two at an event or New Year's Eve or big celebration, but if you have to have alcohol every day or even every numerous times a week, even though it's not every day, you have a problem. Okay, it's just a fact. And you can take it or leave it, and you can get upset, but it's a fact. You really need to reevaluate your life if you need to rely on alcohol to be happy. So anyway, these things are very important, obviously. Regular sun exposures we talked about. We live in Georgia. It's a lot easier to get sun. Obviously, Florida and the southern states like Arizona, Nevada, California, New Mexico, these are even easier to get high quality sun. But at least here in Georgia, you can get good quality sunshine, good amount of time of the year, and do so because it reduces stress, optimizes sleep, which is obviously critical, for nutrient levels like we talked about, and it really does many other things in the body that just brings tremendous amount of benefits. So aside from improving vitamin D levels, improves immune function, reduces inflammation, activates mitochondrial, melatonin production, sets up your circadian rhythm for the day really good. Sun exposure, just healthy sun exposure, again, it's paramount. Stimulates nitric oxide, vasodilation, supports tissue oxygenation, healthy skin, improves just overall cellular energy production, calms the central nervous system down, especially if you're grounding in the same time while you're getting good amount of sun, healthy sun exposure. You'll be amazed how calm and peaceful you'll be afterwards and how it really just settles you and calms you down. So just think about that and make that, a proper part. And just a word of warning, people ask me, don't go out there in the sun, get doused with, sunscreens, because one, you're putting toxins in your body. Number two, you're completely avoiding the benefit of sunshine exposure when you bathing skin, what do we call that? Suntan skin protection creams that a lot of people use. And I feel bad. I mean, I see parents in the pool just taking those sprays and just dousing this poor little children all over their bodies. I don't think people realize the amount of toxins that are present and the chemicals that are present in those sunscreens that prevent proper sun exposure. But sunshine is very important. Yeah, sun is very healing. Again, proper healthy sun exposure is, so I very heavily advise that, because without going into that, the benefits are just numerous on many levels. So this is it for today. I hope this kind of made sense about the most common nutrient deficiency factors that I encounter in my practice. And I hope you guys do something about it. If you have any questions, if you guys like to, perhaps check your levels of vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, hormones, we have phenomenal functional tests that are very easily done and can really look deep into your situation and reveal a lot of, suboptimal, subclinical deficiency that a lot of people deal with. Because when you measure something, it's a lot easier to address, as opposed to just guessing something. But if you guys need any help, reach out, go to DrPND.com. Reach out to us, let us know if you have any questions, and if we can help you, we'll gladly do so. So, guys, this is it for today. I hope you enjoy this podcast. I, again, try to make it as fast as possible, but, it just always works out to be about the same, 45, 50 minutes or so. I hope you guys have a great day, and until next time.